Hello, welcome. This is I Need Living Conversations, the 153rd session. I am with Blue Heron Women. We've been here a very long time, 153 hours.
Almost 3 years.
Yeah, and having lots of fun and doing lots of things. And so this time I promised the goosebumping session because we're going to talk about language and how it's related to flesh, or at least the title is The Flesh of Language. So you're going to tell us why it's so important. Language is so important, and how it relates to our project of freedom, sovereignty, and liberation, and human evolution. Few people would actually believe that what this is about human liberation. It's about taking the next step in human evolution. So here we are, and welcome.
Well, the importance of language is that what you think about is what you become. And your biography, your story that you tell becomes your biology.
Yeah.
And we have to get into this further to really understand this. We have to dive into this.
Okay. Yeah. So that's why it's the flesh. Okay. So language becomes your biology.
And we humans think we are the only beings that have language, but we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important to know.
Like I'm thinking of the Hermetic principle of everything's mental, everything's mind. So then, of course, the mind has to have a language, and it has to speak creation somehow.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine the rain surrounds your house. It's coming down, it's pouring down, it's surrounding your house with a whole world of meaning, secrecy of rumor. Think of it. All that speech pouring down, selling nothing, judging nobody, drenching the thick mulch of dead leaves, soaking the trees, filling the gullies and crannies of the wood with water, washing out the places where men have stripped the hillside. Nobody started it. Nobody's going to stop it. It will talk as long as it wants. The rain, the uvia, will talk as long as it rains. Can you listen as long as it talks? Can we listen as long as it talks? Every attempt to definitively say what language is subject to a curious limitation, for the only medium with which we can define language is language itself. It may be best then to leave language undefined and then to acknowledge its open-endedness, its mysteriousness. As we've already investigated, the event of perception unfolds as a reciprocal exchange between the living body and the animate world which surrounds it. We've talked about perception months upon months ago, the phenomena of perception, probably at least a year ago, if not longer. So the event of perception unfolds as a reciprocal, exchange between the living body and the animate world that surrounds it. This exchange, for all its openness and indeterminacy, is highly articulate. If pre-verbal perception is already an exchange with its own coherence and articulation, then we suggest that this ongoing reciprocity, is the very soul and support of the more conscious exchange that we call language. Human language is a profoundly carnal phenomenon rooted in our sensorial experience of each other and of the world. It's not otherworld. I mean, we're always trying to ascend to go to heaven, right? Language is not of heaven, it's of this fleshly earth. Absolutely of this fleshly earth. Language has its genesis in gestures. Communicative meaning is always in its steps effective. It remains rooted in the central dimension of experience, born of the body's native capacity to resonate with other bodies and with the landscape as a whole. Again, language has its genesis in gestures. Communicative meaning is first incarnate in gestures by which our body spontaneously expresses feelings and responds to changes in its affective environment. So the gesture then is spontaneous and immediate. It is the bodying forth of emotion into the world. It is the feeling of delight or of anguish in its tangible, visible aspect. So the bodily gesture speaks directly to our own body and is understood. So active living speech is a gesture, a vocal gesticulation wherein the meaning is inseparable from the sound, the shape, and the rhythm of the word. Communicative meaning is always in its depths effective. It remains rooted in the sensual dimension of experience, born of the body's native capacity to resonate with other bodies and the landscape as a whole. Linguistic meaning is not some ideal and bodiless essence that we arbitrarily assign to physical sound or word and then toss out into the external world. Meaning actually sprouts in the very depths of the sensory world, in the heat of meeting, the encounter, the participation. We do not, as children, first enter into language by consciously studying the formalities of grammar and syntax, or by memorizing the dictionary definition of words, but by rather actively mixing sounds, by crying in pain, laughing in joy, squealing and babbling, and playfully mimicking the surrounding landscape or soundscape. And so therefore, gradually entering through mimicry into the specific melodies of the local language, our resonant bodies slowly coming to echo the inflections and accents common to our locale and community. So we learn our local language, our native language, not mentally, but bodily. Language then cannot be genuinely studied or understood in isolation from the sensuous reverberation and resonance of active speech. What if linguistic meaning is rooted in the felt experience induced by specific sounds and sound shapes as they echo and contrast with one another? Each language a kind of song, a particular way of singing the world. The more prevalent view of language, at least since the scientific revolution, and still assumed in some manner by most linguists, considers language to be a set of arbitrary but conventionally agreed on words or signs, linked by a purely formal system of syntactic and grammatical rules. Language in this view is rather like a code, a way of representing actual things and events in the perceived world, but it has no internal, non-arbitrary connections to the world, and is so to the natural world, and is so then readily separable from it. The overwhelming prevalence of such a view has arisen because fresh creation of meaning has become a rare occurrence, a time when people commonly speak in conventional ready-made ways which demand from us no effort of expression. A time, in short, when meaning has become impoverished. Think about it. We constantly talk about how sustainability is $1 billion buzzword. Its meaning has become impoverished, right? All these buzzwords. Cage-free chickens, cage-free. You go to the market in the U.S. and it's locally grown. It has no meaning. It's become impoverished. Locally grown still could mean 2,500 miles away. Meaning has become impoverished.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because of our, right?
We say things that no longer have a meaning.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There is also another more overt reason for the dominance of the idea that language is an arbitrary or strictly conventional set of signs. Ever since Aristotle, philosophers have been concerned to demonstrate strictly conventional set of signs. Sorry. Ever since Aristotle, philosophers have been concerned to demonstrate in the most convincing manner possible that human beings are significantly different than all forms of life. And that's a problem. That's the biggest problem, is that we think we are significantly different than all other forms of life.
Mm-hmm.
It was not enough to demonstrate that human beings are unique, for each species is unique in its own way. Rather, it was necessary to show that the human form is uniquely unique, that our noble gifts set us definitely apart from and above the rest of the animate world. The necessity for such philosophical justification became especially urgent in the wake of the scientific revolution, when our capacity to manipulate other organisms increased 100-fold. Descartes' radical separation of the immaterial human mind from the wholly mechanical world of nature did much to fulfill this need, providing a splendid rationalization for the vivisection experiments that soon began to proliferate, as well as for the steady plundering and despoilment of non-human nature in the New World and other European colonies. What do I mean? What do we mean by vivisection? Well, precisely what what's his face, the father of the germ theory, Louis Pasteur did.
Yeah.
Right? He freaking hated German shepherds. So to prove that there was rabies, he would nail them live to a cross. He would crucify them.
Really?
Yes. And then proceed to pull out their brains through their noses and claim that you can give a immunization that will stop that from happening. Please, if you want to prove that there's rabies, please let me nail you live blooded to a cross and let me pull your brains out and give you an immunization and see if that helps you not.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yes. Oh my, and that, no, there were so many other, by vivisection. Oh my, no. The horrific torture they unleashed on animals. It was just crazy.
So it's like already they know that they're not doing science, so they just let go on their craziness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So in the latter half of the 19th century, the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species and the Descent of Man introduced a profound tension into the anthropocentric trajectory of European philosophy and science. Most scientists, while accepting Darwin's theories, were reluctant to relinquish the assumption of human specialness, the assumption that alone justifies so many of the cultural and research practices to which we have now been accustomed. Human specialness. We are animals. We are mammals. The Homo sapien is a mammal.
Mm-hmm.
In earlier centuries, we could ascribe our superiority to the dispensation of God, who had created us as his representatives on earth, or had bequeathed to humans alone the divine capacity for awareness and intelligence. In our own time, it is language conceived as an exclusively human property that is most often used to demonstrate the excellence of humankind relative to all other species. In everyday human discourse, we readily locate a dimension of significance beyond the merely expressive power of the words, a layer of abstract meanings fixed solely, it would seem, by convention. So the term wow may at first be a simple expression of wonder, but it could also come to designate, if we so choose, a particular type of hairdo, or shade of blue, or a specific tactic to be used when debating with fishermen. This is the language, right? We think that wow is it can come to designate whatever we freaking want it to designate. This is what, right? This is part of the domestication process. It is this second layer of agreed upon meanings that is identified with Language in its proper sense by most philosophers and scientists since the enlightenment of humans as the most powerful species of creation, as the dominating species of creation. Only by isolating the second layer of conventional meanings from felt significance carried by the tone, rhythm, and resonance of spoken expression can we conceive of language as a code, as determinate and mappable structure composed of arbitrary signs linked by purely formal rules. And so by conceiving language as a purely abstract phenomenon, we can claim it as a exclusively human attribute and think that other animals around us don't communicate, don't have language. Only by overlooking the sensuous, evocative dimension of human discourse and attending solely to the denotative and conventional aspect of verbal communication, can we hold ourselves apart from and outside of the rest of the animate nature. So only by overlooking the sensuous, evocative dimension of our language and attending solely to the conventional aspect of our verbal communication is that allows us to hold ourselves apart from the rest of the animate world, which we do. Absolutely. 99.9% of us, even most of these New Age gurus, hold themselves apart from the animate world. Language as a bodily phenomenon accrues to all expressive bodies, not just a human. Our own speaking does not set us outside of the animate landscape. It ascribes us more fully in its chattering, whispering, soulful depths. If you were with a friend who met another friend for the first time in many months, you would hear the initial words of surprise, greeting, and pleasure. And if you paid close attention, you would hear a tonal, melodic layer of communication beneath the explicit denotative meaning of the words. A rippling rise and fall of the voices in a sort of musical duet like two birds singing to one another. Each voice, each side of the duet mimes a bit of the other's melody while adding its own inflection and style. So then the two singing bodies, tuning and reattuning to one another, rediscover a common register to remember one another. It requires only a slight shift in focus to realize that this melodic singing is carrying the bulk of communication and that the explicit meanings of the actual words ride on the surface of this depth, like the waves on the surface of the sea. But we've been trained to think so shallowly that we never listen to the deeper. Right? We're all about shallowness. Every single last one of us is about shallowness. So we have to train ourselves to go deeper because our domestication has trained us to be shallow.
Right.
So now, with another small shift in attention, we can hear the birds in active, meaningful speech, conscious beings and earnestly engaged in the same world that we engage in, and from an astonishingly different angle and perspective. So speaking of that, last week, last Saturday, my doors are always open in the summer and the spring, unless I need to turn, and fall, unless I need to turn the air conditioning on in the summer, right? So I'm hearing this chattering coming from the back porch area. So I go out and I don't hear the turkeys. It kind of sounds like a turkey sound, but not really. I don't see the turkeys anywhere. I don't see my turkeys anywhere. So it's like, well, they're not chattering. So who is chattering? Who is chattering? And the guinea hens are wrapped. They're enthralled in attention. They're looking up. And the ducks and the geese that are around are enthralled with attention. They're just listening. So I look up. I have a frame that used to be covered by tent material that was supposed to be a greenhouse, but it's no longer. So it's just a metal frame. And there I see a squirrel that was intently chattering. I mean, it was chattering nonstop. And the guinea hens were focused in totally. They were absolutely freaking listening to the chattering of the squirrel. And there was some other chattering. I don't know if there was another squirrel on the ground that this one up top was chattering to, but once it came down, it it got quiet. But it was very interesting to me to see this chattering taking place. Oh, the squirrel was definitely talking, and the guinea hens and the ducks surrounding it were definitely listening. It was really amazing to see.
Wow.
So if we allow that spoken meaning remains rooted in gesture and bodily expressiveness, we will be unable to restrict our renewed experience of language solely to animals. In the untamed world of direct sensory experience, no phenomenon presents itself as utterly passive or inert. To our sensing body, all phenomena are animate, actively soliciting the participation of our senses, or else withdrawing from our focus and repelling our involvement. Things disclose themselves to our immediate perception as vectors, as styles of unfolding, not as finished chunks of matter given once and for all, but as dynamic ways of engaging our senses and modulating our bodies. So each thing, each phenomenon has the power to reach us and influence us. Thus, at the most primordial level of sensuous bodily experience, we can find ourselves in an expressive gesturing landscape in a world that speaks. And that's utterly what I experienced last Saturday. The world was speaking loudly. Right? It's pretty cool. We regularly talk of howling winds and of chattering brooks. They are far more than the metaphors we think they are. Our own languages are continually nourished by these other voices, by the roar of waterfalls, the thrumming of crickets. It is not by chance that when we hike in the mountains, the words we use to describe the surging waters of the mountain stream or river are words like rush, splash, gush, and wash.
Mm-hmm.
The sound that unites all these words is that which the water herself chants as she flows between the banks. If language is not a purely mental phenomenon, but a sensuous bodily activity born of carnal reciprocity or eini and participation, then our discourse has surely been influenced by many gestures, sounds, and rhythms besides those of our single human species. Indeed, if human language arises from the perceptual interplay between our bodies and the world, then this language belongs to the animate landscape as much as it belongs to you and me. The Swiss linguist Ferdinand Saussure described the structure of any language as a thoroughly interdependent matrix, a webwork, wherein each term has meaning only by virtue of its relation to other terms within the system. So this web-like nature of language ensures that the whole of the system is implicitly present in every sentence and every phrase. The language in its entirety is invoked by the child in her or his first attempts at speech. So the whole of the spoken language surrounding the child snaps him or her up like a whirlwind and tempts him or her with its internal articulations. The enigma that is language is constituted as much by silence as by sounds, and it is not an inert or static structure. It is an evolving bodily field. It is a vast, living fabric, continually being woven by those who speak. At the heart of any language is the poetic productivity of expressive speech. A living language is continually being made and remade, woven out of the silence by those who speak. The silence is that of our wordless participations, of our perceptual immersion in the depths of an animate and expressive world. While individual speech acts are surely guided by the structured lattice of language, that lattice is nothing other than the sedimented result of all previous acts of speech, and will itself be altered by the very expressive activity it now guides. Language is not a fixed or ideal form. It is an evolving medium we collectively inhabit, a vast topological matrix in which the speaking bodies are generative sites, vortices where the matrix itself is continually being spun out of the silence of sensorial experience. It is the first sensuous perceptual world. It is first the sensuous perceptual world that is relational and web-like in its character, and so the organic, interconnected structure of any language is an extension or echo of the deeply interconnected matrix of sensorial reality itself. So ultimately, it is not human language that is primary. It is the sensuous, perceptual, more than human life world whose wild participatory logic ramifies and elaborates itself in language. Since the mid-19th century, the study of our earthly environment has increasingly yielded a view of nature as a realm of complexly interwoven relationships, a field of subtle interdependencies from which no single phenomenon can be picked out without finding it hitched to everything else. And that's what the vast majority of us have yet to understand, is that we, as human beings, are hitched to everything else. But we think we're not. That's the biggest problem. We have at least come to realize that neither the soils, the oceans, nor the atmosphere can be comprehended without taking into account the participation of the innumerable organisms, from the lichens that crumble rocks and the bacterial entities that decompose organic detritus, to all the respiring plants and animals exchanging vital gases with the air. That's why we've explored the secret life of air and the secret life of water, right? So we can understand that everything is hitched to everything else. The notion of earthly nature as a densely interconnected organic network, a biospheric web, wherein each entity draws its specific character from its relations, direct and indirect to all the others, is becoming commonplace, and now will make commonplace the flesh as an interdependent and actively intertwining lattice of mutually dependent, or ini, phenomena that are both sensorial and sentient, of which our own sensing body is a part. That was a big, long sentence. So we're going to make, with Owl Dojos, we're going to make commonplace the flesh of language as an interdependent and actively intertwining ini phenomena between us and our sensing body and the whole of the rest of the world, knowing that we're hitched to everything else around us. It is this dynamic, interconnected reality that provokes and sustains all our speaking, lending something of its structure to all our various languages. The enigmatic nature of language echoes and prolongs into the invisible, the wild, interpenetrating, interdependent nature of the sensible landscape itself. Ultimately, then, it is not the human body alone, but rather the whole of the sensuous world that provides a deep structure of language. Language is life. It is our life and the life of things. It is no more true that we speak, that the things of the animate world speak themselves within us. Language is the very voice of the trees, the waves, and the forests. But as technological civilization diminishes the biotic diversity of the earth, language itself is diminished. As there are fewer and fewer songbirds in the air due to the destruction of their forests and the wetlands, human speech loses more and more of its evocative power. For when we no longer hear the voices of the warbler and the wren, our speaking can no longer be nourished by their cadences. As the splashing speech of rivers is silenced by more and more dams, as we drive more and more of land's wild voices into the oblivion of extinction, our own language becomes increasingly impoverished and weightless, progressively emptied of earthly resonance. So when we begin to attend to our experience, not as an intangible mind, but as a sounding, speaking body, we begin to sense that we are heard, even listened to by the numerous other bodies that surround us. We will find that our sensing body responds to the eloquence of certain buildings and boulders and trees and the articulate motions of dragonflies. We will find ourselves alive in a listening, speaking world. According to an elder of the Dogon tribe of Mali, spoken language was originally a swirling garment of vapor and breath worn by the encompassing earth herself. Later, this undulating garment was stolen by the jackal, an animal whose movements ever since have disclosed the prophetic speech of the world to seers and diviners. Many tribes, like the Swampy Cree of Manitoba, hold that they were given spoken language by the animals. Only if words are felt, body presences like echoes or waterfalls, can we understand the power of spoken language to influence, alter, and transform our perceptual world. This is expressed in the Modoc song, I, the song, I walk here. So when did we shift from a participatory to a non-participatory world? Non-human nature seems to have withdrawn from both our speaking and our senses. What event could have precipitated this double withdrawal, constricting our ways of speaking, even as it muffled our ears and set a veil before our eyes? And I believe that that's being separated from our clan mothers, which would be the Bagua. So that's what we're going to go into next week, is getting to know our clan mothers. We're uniting the Bagua of the I Ching with landscapes, soulscape, which are soulscapes also, to get to understand these. And these hold, as we discussed in embryology, there are 8 metabolic fields that form the embryo.
Oh, that's what you're doing right now, that marriage. Yeah,
Yes.
I read.
Yeah.
So you got that already.
Yeah. Well, I have the marriage. We'll go through that, but yes, we'll do that. We'll go through the basics of the marriage, because I am marrying the Bagua with the landscapes, with the metabolic fields that form the embryo, with the chakras, and with the planets of our birth charts.
Wow. Okay.
And it's very brief, because it has to be very brief in this. We can't go deeper until we can kind of understand that these are all intertwined. So that's where we'll go next week.
Sometimes less is more. So
is understanding how we co-evolved. First, we were spun into materiality by our spirit beings, by the 5 elemental spirits. And then we co-evolved with these very material fields.
Okay. And so what would you title that?
That's how we co-evolved into being.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay. I still would think about having the 8s, the 8 numbers, or the. Well, I have it. I can put it in the image.
Yeah, because it's all about the 8, which is on the golden spiral, right? It goes from the 3 to the 5 to the 8. So how the eight mothers co-evolved us into being, something like that.
I like that better. Okay. Wow. Because you're talking about clan mothers, I was like, I was liking that, and then you took the clan mothers out.
Right. Right.
Okay. How the 8 clan mothers evolved us into being. Okay. And if you're watching this, you know what it's going to be about. Kind of have a little preview of that. Otherwise, well, I'll have to tell people what a little bit what's going to be about, and so we stick with the same time, or do
7:45.
45 next time. This time I forgot to change it. So next time 7:45 Central Standard Time. I Need Living Conversations. Thank you for being here. Please.
And soon we'll be in harmony with Mexico time.
That's true. You're gonna have a time change, Sean. Let me know when that
beginning of November. Yeah.
Because I don't get any. I would have to remember, because otherwise,
I'll let you know.
Otherwise, I don't get any. There's like, it doesn't come in the news anymore. It's like
it's either November 2 or November 5 that it happened, something like that.
Okay.
So yeah.
Ready? Well, for people that are watching this, thank you, and please support this by participating. That's what we really want. I mean, it's so much. There's so much to do, and we are so far behind somehow. I mean, there's just so much to do, and so it's like a lot more than just giving a like. What we need, we really need to just full participation, and we know that this will be understood by those who open up to listening to the Spirit. So thank you, and send you lots of love, and we'll see you next week. See you. Bye bye.
Yeah.